Hey there, guys. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Cybersecurity Meg, and today I'm really excited because I'm sitting down to interview one of my best friends and one of my old colleagues. This is Yevgen. So I want to kind of mention that Yevgen and I, we used to work together for about 3 years. We both worked at Tech Data, which is a Fortune 100 company that I joke no one has ever heard of because we don't work with customers. So whenever, and I'm sure Yevgen's familiar with this, whenever people are like, hey, where do you work? And I say Tech Data, people are like, what is that? I have no idea what that is. But yeah, Yevgen is a highly valuable friend of mine, a mentor, someone that I look up to. He's helped me get to where I am in my career. And that's why I wanted to sit down and get to speak with him today. So Yevgen, if you'd like to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. That's kind of an honor. Although, I don't strive to be famous, but it's great to have this conversation. So, hi everyone. My name is Yevken, and as as Meg mentioned, we work together at the big company, and I've been in cybersecurity for over 10 years, and I started actually being interested in a security world when I was even in the school, and then later it continued through university. And yeah, at some point I just got into freelancing in this area, and after that I decided to go to big company like enterprise company to gather the experience that you will not get, let's say, in a small medium businesses.
Right.
And so this is how I, yeah.
Okay, great. So I think one of the big questions people are asking, especially when I kind of put out the word that I was going to be interviewing you, was what exactly is application security, kind of in the more broad sense? Why is it important? And how do you specifically get into application security? So I think those are some things people are really curious about.
Oh, good question. Let me Google quickly. I'm just kidding.
True. I think nowadays people are like, what the heck is application security? It's changing
Right.
all the time.
Right. Well, I don't know. I've been so long in that I don't know myself anymore. No. So, jokes aside, yeah, application security is a domain of entire cybersecurity area or industry, which
Mhm.
specifically focuses on security or securing or safeguarding the software against the threats of exploitation of vulnerabilities or weaknesses in this software.
Right.
And when I say software, it could be web applications, websites. It could be native applications such as for desktop or mobile devices, or it could be embedded applications such as somewhere like cars, etc. So everything that has to do with software, and then any type of software is, application, security. And
Mhm.
very important is that most of the people, when they say application security, they refer to web application security, because
Right.
that's a huge chunk of software out there, and mostly what is being yeah. So and
Right.
so I think it was the first part of the question.
Yeah, so it was kind of a three-part question. You definitely
Okay.
answered the first part. The second part is why is app security important and what did your career path look like to get into it?
Sounds good. So why is it important? It's important because it's been in over years, the the importance of software have been growing. So
Right.
over, let's say, even if you look at any hardware today, or any gadgets, any devices, any tangible, physical devices, they all run by software. Yeah, and the software is different, right? It could be a firmware, it could be embedded software, etc., etc. But then over 70 over I think, I don't want to be like, but over 77% of hardware devices, tangible, that you can touch, they're actually being ran by a piece of software that is not implemented like a silicon where basically you have cheap, you have chips, et cetera, but you really
Sure.
have, just a general processor and memory, etc., and like a mini microcomputer that runs some piece of software. So that's why
Mhm.
important. Essentially, we're going away from those, rigid hardware design silicon pieces into
Mhm.
like all the time programmable and reprogrammable devices, and they're run
Mhm.
by software. And essentially, it matters. That's why application security matters, or software security matters.
Right. Absolutely.
So how I got into that, I'll try to go quickly. So as I mentioned before, sort of my interest in systems and computer systems grew from the school times, and at some point it grew into direction how to understand how actually the operating system or any type of like computer system works. And
Mhm.
from there, because of certain age and certain environment, I actually grew and started asking questions how I can actually modify the systems the way I want them to work, but
Right.
not the way they were designed to work. And this is what people call cracking, hacking, and everything like that, right? So,
Right.
and this is important. So you have to have this mindset. I want to force the system to work the way you want it, instead of like the way it was designed by whoever created it. So that was the first part. The second part, I started doing a lot of software development when I was in the university, to earn money and basically practice coding, because coding is essential. It develops your brain and certain capabilities. That's one thing. And another thing is it just exciting if you like build things, and I like to build things. I actually love to build things, and coding is one of those things because you're building, right? um, and at some point the enlightenment came and said like, why I cannot combine those two things,
Right.
the perspective of the developer who building stuff, and the perspective of the actual hacker who forces those software to behave a little bit different than it was designed.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that's really interesting. I have a list of questions that people wanted me to ask you because they're curious about application security. But I think one question that wasn't necessarily proposed to ask is what languages would you say right now in 2021 are the most important for people to be knowledgeable of and proficient in if they want to work in application security? Or would you say like Java or Python, or what would you say, in your opinion, are the most important and useful?
um it's a good question. I don't really think that language would be important to work in application security. What most important to work in application security, or a matter of fact, any area of cybersecurity,
Hmm.
is that you can learn on your own and learn quickly. This is the
Sure.
most important thing. And in terms of languages, I think everyone will have their own preference, and depending on the application and the use case scenario. Um, in terms of like, I mean, so there is two aspects to this question. I'll try to go faster. So one is like, if you are, let's say, a developer, and you
Hmm.
look like, oh, what language should I code? Well, you have to look what is most needed and list available on the market. Means like you're gonna get higher pay for your skills, and I think this is what
Right.
you really should look at, because at this point, languages are so similar that there is
Hmm.
no huge advantage or disadvantage aside from the specific application areas, such as like
Right.
embedded software in the cars. So this would be the developer perspective. Look what is needed on the market. It could be a brand new thing, whatever, and then see that there is not a lot of offer for that. So
Hmm.
high demand and then low offer will bring you the biggest, highest pay in terms of.
Right.
And I think like a lot of the languages are exciting. My personal favorite probably would be anything that looks like a Java or C sharp syntax like. Um, is this is what I personally like, because a certain, but doesn't mean you have to be Java developer. Right now
Hmm.
there is oversupply of Java developers, and with that, it actually means two things. The pay is lower, one thing, and another thing is the quality of software is lower.
Mhm.
So yeah, does
That's
that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting because I'm constantly seeing people ask, what languages should I know? Do I need to learn programming to get into cybersecurity? And that's not the focus of this interview. It was just really interesting to hear your perspective. So thank you. One of the biggest questions that my friends, I want to call them, I don't like referring to people as subscribers or followers. They wanted me to ask you, what challenges and obstacles have you encountered in an organization or in a project where you were trying to enhance the security culture? And how did you approach it? Like, how did you overcome those issues?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So the biggest challenge is that security is being considered as an afterthought. Um,
Sure.
and it's like everywhere in every part of IT or tech organization, except few, because it came in later. So at the
Hmm.
beginning, it wasn't even the thing. I mean, in the beginning of internet, right? Security was not a thing, like like other things as well. But it came in very late and basically blew up very late in terms of like hype and its importance, right? Um, so that's the biggest challenge. It's an afterthought, and because it's an afterthought, it means like huge amount of work, huge amount of back and forth, and uh, and and tremendous change, and it requires tremendous change of the mindset, and the
Sure.
mindset not only people who really code, but also mindset of management, executive management,
Hmm.
etc. So that's a huge thing.
Hmm.
Um, Go ahead.
Well, I think this flows really nicely into another popular question, that is, how can organizations, big or small, ensure that their developers are implementing secure code practices? Like, what are some of the things that the application security architects or the cybersecurity teams can help the developers to learn more secure coding, or what controls can be put in place to achieve this?
Right. So and that comes to the second part of the how to overcome and how to address that.
Hmm.
Um, I think what is important is that the leadership and executive management, any type of management, anyone who is in charge actually,
Right.
and sort of have a leadership position, um, should not present security as some sort of a standalone topic. It should be considered as an overall quality of software. And this is where you make the determination or application. When you build something, do you want a good quality? Do you want a mediocre or bad quality? And if someone says like, we want a good quality product, and why wouldn't you, right? Because a good quality product sells.
Right.
Um, Security is part of it, just like performance, just like a good coding conventions or best practices, and this should be part of it. And so, how organization can do that? Well, they should invest in a high quality resources, and they should also invest in training those resources, right? Because things change. This is one thing, and it's harder done than said. Um, what I personally think needs to be done is that people with a certain roles from time to time would need to change their roles and basically be in the role of someone else to
Mm.
realize and understand what it actually is about and how hard it is. So, for example, um, there's someone who may be looking for let's say quality issues with the software, which security, application security, just will be part of that. And there is someone who is producing the code, right? So
Hmm.
you need to switch those people, even if it's a for short period of time, like 2 weeks or a month. If you switch their positions and say like the quality guy now, has to deliver the code in some way, and the guy who was creating the code now has to deal with quality, the people will be much more empathic for the
Hmm.
other's position. And I think this will create a growth and bond between those people, and actually smooth out the you know the
Hmm.
journey. to a better
Sure.
quality software.
Mhm. And Yevgen, I know you have your CISSP. I recently got mine too. One of the big things that I felt was really kind of pushed throughout the content of studying for the CISSP was security by design, like building it in to the very beginning. And like you mentioned earlier, not having it be an afterthought of, oh, we're
Mm.
about to push out into production in 2 days. What can we do to make our application more secure? Instead, it should be at the very beginning. These are the security metrics that I want to achieve, and how can we make sure that happens from the very beginning? Is that something that you would agree with?
Certainly. See, you're better in application security than me.
Oh man.
I have this long time speech, and then I mentioned to I failed to mention that security by design. Certainly, it is super important that you plan out things at the beginning, and yes, security by design is the thing.
Mhm.
And if it's not an afterthought, this is like a huge help in terms of setting up your properly your development lifecycle properly and not having issues
Right.
later
Mhm.
and at the later stage. So
Right.
certainly.
Great. So, one of the questions that was posed, and this is a bit more of a technical specific question, people were wondering what you prefer between Vim or Nano. And maybe you could kind of explain for us or the people who aren't sure what those are and kind of give your opinions on the both if you're okay with that.
Actually, none. I prefer Visual Basic Editor. No,
Is there a
I'm
reason
joking.
for that?
I'm joking. Well, because I started with Visual Basic
Okay, yeah. We
Editor.
always tend to prefer the things we have the most knowledge with, so that makes sense.
No, I'm joking. No, it's a good question, and I heard of that question before.
Hmm.
And an answer will be everyone gonna hate it. It depends, right? So,
Yeah.
but I will say that way. If you have a basic or simple tasks to fulfill, go with Nano. It's more simplified and easy to deal with. I personally use Nano more than I use Vim
Hmm.
because most of my tasks are basic that I'm using those tools for. And
Sure.
if you need like really like advanced stuff in terms of like when you're like Linux admin and you need to work with then you can use Vim. But I
Hmm.
think for most people, Nano is the way to go because it's simpler and more intuitive and easier.
Hmm. Okay, great.
I like those
So
type of questions because they're challenging. They're actually challenging.
that's good. That's what we're here for, is to discuss the questions that aren't being asked or the questions that people are curious about. So that's good to hear that you like the questions. Now, to kind of segue into that, one of the things that's really been on my mind lately, and also a lot of the people who I like talk with every day, is obviously as we're going into 2021, we're all hearing about automation, the push
Okay.
for automation to automate everything. If you can automate it, it should be automated. How do you feel about that? Like, what possible effects do you think that can have on security? And at what point should you stop automating? Like, where is automation too much? Or is there not such a thing as automating too much?
My personal view is a really good question as well. My personal view have been there's always never enough automation. So
Okay.
I don't think you can really achieve the level where you will think we have to stop, or at least not in cybersecurity, not at this point.
Hmm.
So it's never enough, and I in my career I always was pushing for what I called zero touch solutions.
Hmm.
Solutions should be automate the solutions that really help, right? You can't automate coding, not necessarily in terms of like creating or building things.
Hmm.
It's done by people and it requires creativity. But a lot of other things they could be automated. So
Hmm.
I don't think anyone should stop and perfecting the ways of things being automated in actually integrated because automation on its own without integration has only reduced value. So you have to really think a little bit broader and integration plus automation, and this is the key for efficiency.
Hmm.
And there is no way around it because the whole world built on on top of that.
Right. So I agree with you. And the reason I agree with you is because, in my experience, when we automate things, it gives professionals, especially in cybersecurity, the opportunity to stop doing those kind of more rudimentary or basic tasks that take up so much time. And instead of just being so reactive, waiting for things to happen, like perhaps waiting for a breach to happen, it allows cybersecurity professionals to more efficiently spend their time, possibly in threat hunting or just things that are more proactive instead of being reactive. So that's kind of my take on it. If you would agree with that, maybe you've had a similar experience.
No, correct. I totally agree, and it also contributes to your personal development because if you just
Sure.
work on things that could be automated but haven't been, you're just eventually gonna burn out. And I know there's people who likes repetitive tasks, and it's fine,
Sure.
but you need change no matter what. You need to step away from those things from time to time anyway. And then essentially, being in cybersecurity, you have to think that you have to develop yourself all the time. There is no way around that because this thing is so dynamic and so developing, and
Right.
you have to try to keep up. And that's why I said at the beginning, learning and then learning on your own without waiting someone like to deliver you the education or some sort of teaching.
Right.
That's the key thing. Yeah, and
Mhm.
then hey, if you can automate things and it'll free up your time and you could be more creative because the creativity is what matters, right? Because if you
Absolutely.
do not have time for creativity, you're not going to have a certain level of success that you need actually to beat the, let's say, the bad guys if you're on a good
Right.
side, right? So that's what I
Great.
think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Now, another question that was posed, and I really like this question, but basically, we were asked, how do we manage vulnerabilities that can be present within libraries or packages or third-party applications? And I think the question was posed obviously because of what's been going on in the cybersecurity world lately, what with the Sunburst and SolarWinds attack and all the kind of focus shifting to third party software causing all of these large exploits happening. So people are really curious, what are some of the things we can do to manage these vulnerabilities and to kind of mitigate the presence of them being exploited?
Very good question. And manage is a broader word and broader topic. I don't really, you can try to mitigate. I don't think you can really manage them. So few things
Sure.
that I definitely would recommend. First of all, do not trust third-party vendors, no matter how good they are,
Right.
because it's not everyone fails, just like human being. So they will
Right.
fail eventually. It's just a matter of time, or they
Mhm.
already failed and you don't know. So do not trust.
Absolutely.
Do not right. So do not rely on just one thing and saying like, oh, they will take care of that. That's the
Mhm.
biggest mistake. If you really if you really don't do it for check mark, but you really want to have a good level of protection and have your, so you have
Right.
to have a multiple level of defenses, and just do not trust just on one single control, like security control or protection,
Right. Mhm.
which can fail anytime. So that's
Defense
one
in
thing.
depth, pretty much, right?
Right, defense in depth, basic and hard actually to implement. But
Mhm.
that's one thing. And the second thing, you can't really manage those vulnerabilities. From my experience, they just they just grow and accumulate, and at some point they become like just overwhelming. So what I would recommend is update your libraries, any type of third-party software that you are using, update uh, as much or as often as possible. So of course, if you're a big enterprise company, you have to be careful because a new version can introduce things that will like break systems, right? So you
Mhm.
probably would need some sort of testing, but um, you need the testing. But aside from that, update is regular as soon as fast as possible.
Mhm. Gotcha.
So this is how I would approach this. Um yeah, I don't know if you have any other thoughts, but yeah.
No, I think that aligns really well with what my personal experience with it is. You mentioned that you don't think it's 100% possible to mitigate these vulnerabilities or get rid of them to reduce the like residual risk to none. And largely that's because you can't control what another company does, right? I mean, it's another company that has its own set of goals and, business stakeholders. And if you're not directly managing that company, their cybersecurity, the things they're doing, then you can try hard, right? You can get their SOC 2 reports, you can do third party risk management, you can do so much. But at the end of the day, because you don't explicitly have control over that other environment, you can only do so much, right? I understand what you're saying.
Correct.
Um,
And then
so
maybe one more, I'm sorry,
no,
one more
go
thing
ahead.
to add to this, I think, because from the perspective of developer, when I was a developer,
Mhm.
I always tried to use libraries that has a good reputation is one thing, but also that are open source, if you can find one. I never liked the proprietary software. And the reason being is because being really good at what you do, if you are, and you should strive for that, if you have the library that has an issue, and I had these situations where there was
Mhm.
like some weird, even not security related, but some weird bug, you can actually go into the source code and fix it yourself. And
Mhm.
then you are essentially closing the issue or fixing the issue quicker than the company can do. You always will be quicker than than the actual vendor,
Right,
right?
because
This
you're
is
you're a personal user, so you're going to experience or run into the issues generally more quicker than the
right,
company who's just producing things would. That
right.
makes sense.
So
So,
yeah.
sorry.
Mhm.
To kind of piggyback off of that, what would you
Okay.
say are some of the easy wins that can be implemented in a corporation that you should look for first? Like things that can be made more secure without much effort, but they'll have a large impact.
Well, it's a good question, but then the question, it should be like let's say going more specific in a certain direction. But it depends again, right? So if we're
Sure.
talking about software development lifecycle, um,
Absolutely. Yeah, let's put it in the framework of the SDLC. Let's do that.
okay. So yeah, in terms of like software development lifecycle, certainly, as you mentioned, secure by design, and do not do anything possible. Do not put the application security as some sort of a standalone topic. It should be a part of overall good design, right? And secure by design is just one part of it. So it's just the application must be like performant, secure, and etc. So all so you have to put this in requirements that
Hmm.
there's certain things that has to be implemented. So I don't think it's necessarily easy, but
Right.
it needs to be done, and it could be done. The most issues are coming from lack of uh, willingness to actually do this, and the reason why is because I think the biggest challenge is competing let's say preferences or requirements. Most people or most companies trying to build product as quickly as possible and bring it to the market, and that's why they cut corners, and that's why they also basically cut quality.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's an easy win. What would be the easy win?
Maybe there's not any
I think
easy wins. I mean,
yeah.
if we think about it in cybersecurity, the things that are worth doing that are going to have the biggest impact on keeping an organization safe, generally they take a lot of time, a lot of resources, or they require investing into really expensive state of the art tools. So maybe that should be the conclusion, is that the things that are worth the most are usually going to cost the most. Unfortunately, it's logical though.
Certainly, and then yeah, and that's just like if you are looking at the application security lifecycle, the easy win probably is getting um, some sort of like, let's say if we're talking about web applications, getting
Mhm.
a good web application like firewall or or protection solution, for
Mhm.
example, like
Yeah.
Cloudflare, which is like for small medium businesses, or if it's like enterprise, getting like Imperva or even like Akamai. So those
Right.
solutions, they're like, they could be super expensive, but if we're talking about really, really easy wins, it's
Mhm.
essentially installing another protection, or defense in front
Right.
of your application if you
Hmm.
think there is issues or in general. And
Sure.
this is a really easy win. And in terms of like what would probably have the highest impact in terms of software development lifecycle, I was thinking about this, and I like to think on the fly. So I think giving the people who are actually creating the code, the developers, the coders, or has who actually has to do with creativity, who deliver the solutions product,
Hmm.
giving them some time off. And when I say off, to actually do research and development and to develop themselves and has this time off where they don't have the pressure to deliver. So let's say if you have to develop like 5 days a week, it's too much. You have to have one day off where you can reflect, what did you did this week,
Hmm.
how did it go, what was the quality,
Sure.
and just in general development. And this is why I think um, I think now retrospectively, I think like Google had something like research and development 20% of the time back in the days. I think that was one of the reasons why they were so successful, at least at the beginning. And they went away with that because the pressure grew and etc. But I think this was why was the reason, I don't know. But from what I see from my experience or perspective, this is what I would do. I would get people time to actually do something else than just deliver the code under the pressure. And then they
Mhm.
have time to learn things and actually take care of the things. And security will be one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes complete sense because if you're constantly in that go, go, go mindset of wanting to push things into production and get it done, you're not accurately taking the time that's necessary to really reflect and look back on what was the quality of my work? How could it have been better? Did I meet the goals that I needed to meet? That kind of thing. So that makes a lot of sense. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'll try to wind things down. But one of the big questions that people are asking is if they want to get into application security, say that people want to get into the role that you were in, application security architect. Do you have any tips that you think would be helpful for people to have a successful career in app security?
It's a good question. So important is, first thing before you get into this, understand if your mindset is something that will help you to strive in that. There's
Hmm.
no reason to get in there and then and at later point in time sort of like don't like it or start hating it, right? um so you have to do this, what are you really interested, what are you really curious about? Are you curious, like, let's say, maybe like brake systems, right? Or look at the weaknesses, etc. What tips to get in there? Well, you can start as security analyst. You can start as maybe a junior or associate, software security engineer, or um, so it depends on your level. If you don't know like anything, right, anything, then you
Hmm.
certainly has to start with learning the way the systems work, like operating system, like
Right.
how the software runs on one or another system, because it would be different, either being a laptop or maybe a mobile device. In
Hmm.
general, it's all in general, overall holistic perspective, it's kind of similar, but when it comes to details, it will be different. That's why exploiting uh, a desktop or a mobile device are a little bit different, right? So get into this, get the basics. So you have to have, so you basically you have to become a system analyst, right? A system analyst. So you have to understand the way the system work, and then
Hmm.
from there you can grow into securing the systems, right? Because if you
Right.
understand where the system works, you know where the weaknesses are, and you know how they could be exploited, and this is what matters.
Hmm.
This is in terms of more like a attack perspective. In terms of like application security, a defense perspective, well, the news are you first have to have an attack perspective, because if you do not, like, even when you create things and you develop things, if you do not really think of how this could be um, maliciously attacked or exploited, you wouldn't really think of those things when you develop, right, or where you create
Right.
products.
Right.
um, so it just look with you can can make those parallels with the real world. Like if you, if you build, let's say, the building, and you need to safeguard the building, right? So what are the threats? So that it's kind of the same thing, right? So you need
Right.
to have this perspective, and then when you're building it, then you can certain design by design made it so that it's not exploitable. I hope it's helpful. It's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's really helpful for people. Yevgen, I want to thank you for your time. I think this was a super insightful discussion about what application security is, a bit about how to get into it, how to kind of implement application security. I think that you are really valuable, that the information and knowledge and experience that you have really brings a lot to the field. And I'm going to put your LinkedIn down below. That way, if any of the application security folks want to connect with you, then they can reach out. I just want to thank you again for your time. I really appreciated it. And yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Well, sure thing. I really enjoy that, and I appreciate you having me here and having great conversation. Hope we're going to have follow-ups and more great questions. Keep coming with the questions, because it challenged me, and it also develops me, as a security professional or individual.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, thank you
Okay.
so much, Megan. It was awesome.
Thank you, Yevgen.